r/AskReddit by Reddit tells. Doctors of Reddit, what's the best asking for a friend story you've heard? Wife's dad is a urologist. When we first started dating, a friend of mine wanted her to ask if any of the penis enlargement pills were legit and actually worked. She went with the asking for a friend approach and he immediately assumed she was talking about me. Thanks babe. So, do they? Asking for a friend. You should have played a power move and addressed it directly. Oh, not for me. Your daughter is satisfied with my size, right babe? I was asked the following. So if I swallow cum and flush it down with vodka, do I still get pregnant? She was in early 20s. She waited for her actual friend who broke her nose in a bar fight. So if I swallow cum and flush it down with vodka, do I still get pregnant? Actually, I'd say the odds are pretty good. Do I still get pregnant? Oh boy. Lady walks in and goes, so, if you cheated and got pregnant, but then had sex with your husband, would the baby become his? It took everything in me not to laugh. Hehe, I would have shit myself laughing. Vasectomies don't always prevent babies. Sometimes it just changes the color. A document. Had a guy who just got out of jail a few days earlier came in with his GF who had signed him for an STD check. Walk in to meet them, and he says casually, is it possible to get gonorrhea in your throat? At that moment I knew he had gonorrhea in his throat. So, how would my friend know if he had gonorrhea in his throat? Who goes to the ER for an STD check? That's hardly an emergency. Your conclusive skills are amazing. No wonder you're a drive. I once had to tell a patient that she indeed had gonorrhea of the throat. Her immediate response, I'm going to kill him. She did not kill him, and they remained a couple. Not a doctor, but public health worker, kinda NSFW. Had an older man come into our clinic asking for a specific type of STD check. Guy's ex-wife was going around telling rumors that he was having sex with his goats, so was wanting to know if there was a way we could do a STD test that could prove if he had/hadn't had sex with any goats. Through this whole conversation, he just abruptly asks, so if someone was having sex with a goat, what STDs could they get? That dude is totally fucking his goats. Edit. Typo. My father is a doctor, and he got a call once in the middle of the night from his call share doctor's patient. The man asked what to do about a bump on his friend's arm that he scratched and something came out. He mentioned it was leaking a little oil now. It was as it. He scratched a pimple. Woke the whole family up at 3 AM because he had to page my dad over as it. How old was this man? This makes me annoyed because I have to call doctors at 3 AM with lab results when they're bad, and I almost always get a huge attitude. I get no one likes to be woken up in the middle of the night, but I'm not the one making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to be up at this hour to tell you your patient's blood is full of dead heart muscle. I worked for a dermatologist. So many old people wanted to come in for emergency appointments to have zits popped. It feels like it's going to pop. Doctor reads the note and says, I don't have time for this. Why don't they just have their spouse or grandkids pop it? They were not happy when the DR's reply to their message was to pop it and cover it with a band-aid and antibiotic ointment. He'd also suggest to pop it with a needle, cleaned by alcohol if required. It was like the end of the fucking world to these patients. But no, a single zit is not more urgent than a day packed with skin cancer and things like that. The only pimple I put in as soon as possible ended up being impetigo. They're nothing alike. The area also has an abundance of immediate care clinics which were an option. There's a reason boomers have a stereotype of being entitled. I have an owie, it's more important than someone else's cancer. I briefly dated a doctor and she told me a few hilarious stories. 1. If my friend masturbated with someone else's vibrator, will she get an STD? 2. Can wearing a butt plug all day give you diarrhea? 3. If you have an ulcer and swallow a guy's cum, can you get pregnant? 2 out of 3 of these seem like somewhat legitimate questions. Seem like valid questions. Did you get the answer for #2? Asking for a friend. I doctor here. Finally closed our offices to all but emergency care. Last year or so I had a staff member ask me for a friend if she got shot in the eye with cum and is now getting mild discharge. Is that okay? I looked at her eye and saw discharge. went to the cabinet, gave a bottle of antibiotic to her for her friend, and then went back to my patients. 2 days later I look at her and say, your eye is looking much better today. She says thanks. The discharge stopped a half day after using the drops. So her eye was pregnant, right? Divorced women/cougars like to explain muscle strains as sex injuries to get a rise out of docs. Best way to deal is to stay monotone and not react. Patient describes proximal adductor muscle pain in hip flexion during recreational activity. Rated 7/10. Pain is now present during ambulation. If you don't react, they move along. Doesn't take long in the office to have seen and/or heard everything. I'm not interested that you are recently divorced, started working out, and discovered Tinder. Good on you, but it takes more to get a rise out of me. One colleague in training had a professional cuddler with a similar injury. Doc was very conservative, possibly on the sheltered side, and in front of 2 of his superiors during the case, and she was not shy. I would add she was not visually what I assume most would hope for in a professional cuddler either. That one I enjoyed, on account of him, not her. My cousin is always telling this story to my sister when she's drunk. The girl who came in asking if her friend washes his condoms after sex and reuses them, would they still be able to work? After a week the same girl comes in to ask my cousin to tell her boyfriend that the kid was his. Apparently this friend she was asking about was her boyfriend's close friend who she cheated with, and he got her pregnant after reusing condoms more than a few times to save money. Won't be saving money for condoms anymore, that's for sure. I just can't imagine being that cheap. Even if you need a special brand, it would have been less expensive than a paternity test or a baby. I asked for a friend about hormone therapy. She had just come out to me as trans, and I wanted direct information in order to help her as best as I could. I did not expect my doctor to dig out my old blood work and tell me that my transition from female to male would be easier than most due to the already high amounts of testosterone in my body. She asks me every once in a while if I'm ready to start treatment. I don't know if it's a joke or if she legitimately thinks I'm trans, as I've explained why I've asked in depth multiple times. Can putting a catfish in your rectum cause internal bleeding? Asking for a friend. And I didn't believe him until his friend came in and had 7 scars on his face just from trying to catch a knife while laying down. The reason I didn't believe my patient was asking for a friend was because he came into the hospital with an injury from falling off the roof while riding a skateboard inside a shopping cart. Asking for my puppy. I took a class in medical parasitology. The professor, a PhD in parasitology, once had a very concerned neighbor bring him dog poop that had human pinworms in it. He suggested the neighbor take his puppy to the veterinarian for some albendazole and assured him that the infection would resolve. Pinworms are still a common and very treatable infection, even among first world children, but not puppies. One of my besties called me late at night after his day party. He said someone who was staying the night wanted to have sex with his GF. They were drunk and a little uncoordinated, and somehow the frenulum, the little string thingy at the tip of the penis, ripped, and it won't stop bleeding. I gave his friend some general advice on stopping the bleeding, and recommended a trip to the ER. The next day he asked me if I had any recommendations for urologists for his friend, because he needs minor surgery on his PP. I told him to cut the bullshit, and in response he sent me a pic of his injured penis. So, long story short, his one got a remodeling, and he is still with this vagina dentata sporting woman. I like that the friend was having sex with his girlfriend, and he was still supportive enough to ask advice for the friend. He probably got poked by an IUD. Not a doctor, but I saw this dude say to a doctor, "Can 2 white people have a black child?" Asking for a friend. The man's wife had an affair. Edit. The dude had the baby in the stroller, and when he was walking out he looked like he was going to yeet the child, and I was secretly dying inside. That's rough. He must have had so many emotions running through his head. I wonder if the guy ever suspected anything before his wife gave birth. I have read that in some famines that is possible. One of the baby's parents must have an ancestor of another race. I knew a family that had this happen. The great-great-grandma was dark-skinned, and they were very light-skinned. cause confusion until a family member mentioned this. Thanks for watching the video. Support the channel by liking the video. Leave a comment below with your own stories. Subscribe to the channel for more videos to come.